At one point or another in your career, you're going to be asked to write a report for your boss, your board, or other stakeholders. It'll bring back memories of high school or college when you needed to prepare a research report. I've certainly faced that challenge many times during my work history, and most recently when I wrote my latest book. Whether it's a report for school, work, or a book you want to write, the techniques are similar. I found a method that worked very well for me, even though it was too late to help me in school. Hi, I'm Dave Edwards. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to share with you some tips for making the process of writing and gathering information for a report you're preparing a little bit easier. If you like these kinds of videos, find that you enjoy this video, I would ask that you click the like button below and possibly even subscribe. I'd appreciate that very, very much. So how does my system work? Well, let's begin with how it worked for me in writing 2 books and the planning of 2 more. You'll see how you can adapt this to whatever writing project that you have. Research, of course, is the very first step. Several years ago, I decided that I wanted to write 2 books. The first was advice for people who wanted to become managers in my field of public media. I also wanted to write a second book on how to become a better leader. Both would be based on my personal experiences, but would also need to incorporate research and case studies. I created 2 digital folders in Evernote, which I use extensively for many professional and personal projects, but you could also create a paper folder for each of your planned writing projects. Every time I saw an article or a study related to one of my topics, I would add it to the appropriate folder. As I said, I have 2 more ideas for books, so I have folders for each of them right now as well. Once I was convinced that I had plenty of material, I went through the files and used 4x6 index cards to make notes on each article's topic and ideas. If I found a quote that I might want to use, I'd write it verbatim and surround it with quotation marks. I'd also write down the person who was being quoted, their title, and the source where I found the information. I knew that would help me later when I needed to prepare my source list. If I found other information that I thought I might want to write about, I would carefully paraphrase the material. Paraphrasing helps me by putting information into my own words and avoiding the possibility of plagiarism. So the next step is the organization step. I begin grouping all of my index cards into subcategories. I just spread them out on a table in my office so I can see them all. That helps me see the flow of the different subtopics. And it also illustrates if I'm missing something. If I'm missing certain areas, I know that the research phase needs to continue. As part of the organization phase, I begin to outline each area. I do that in writing. This allows me to write possible thesis statements. That's really the first time where I can see the book's draft structure. It's starting to come together. Now, at this point, I have to decide whether my topic is too broad, too narrow, or if I'm on a track that will make me and my readers happy. If you get to the point where you're happy with the direction, the fun begins. You need to start the writing process. Every writer seems to have a system. Some insist that they need to start writing for 2 hours beginning at 5 in the morning. Others are night owls. For me, I know that I'm really at my best mid-morning. So when I started writing both of my books, I set aside a couple of hours every morning, beginning at around 9 in the morning. I treated it like it was a job or a meeting that was a fixture on my calendar. I tried but was not successful at writing in coffee shops. I love feeling comfortable in my home office, but it can't be too quiet either. I need a little music in the background. I don't use any fancy writing programs. I've played around with Scrivener and many writers use it. I know they swear by it. My experience is that it helps you with structure, but my note cards and filing system makes that unnecessary for me. So I actually write in Microsoft Word and I keep a running document in Dropbox. By the way, these are not paid endorsements. I'm just trying to share with you what I use. Really, the only other software that I use is Grammarly, which checks my spelling, my grammar, my sentence structure as I go along. The notes that I had previously organized are at my side. If I've done a good job, I could just follow each card as I write paragraph after paragraph. As you learned early in school, a good paper starts with a good thesis that telegraphs what you're going to be writing about. Usually by the time I begin to write, I'm reasonably confident in the central thesis. As I approach each chapter, I review my note card structure to find if it's part of the thesis. As I continue each chapter, I know that everything I write must support that chapter's thesis. I work off of every note card set aside for that chapter. When I'm done, I move to the next chapter. I usually take a break before I review the next set of cards and prepare its thesis. Some days I write faster than others. But after an hour, maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours, I find that my brain gets cloudy and I'm laboring too much to continue. I used to aim for 1,500 to 2,000 words a day, but I usually follow my rhythm. When I start to get a little tired, I set it aside, I go do something else, and I come back to it later. We often hear about writer's block. For some people, it happens only at the beginning of a project, while others face it at the beginning of every writing session. Getting started can be a challenge, but I've learned how to beat that back, plus get into the groove of where I left off the previous day. I call this reverse writing. This means I begin the editing process while I continue to write. Each day when I sit down at my computer, I go back to where I started the previous day. I read everything out loud slowly. Doing so, I catch writing errors. I find things that made sense as I was writing them, but now in retrospect, I need to clarify. I make the necessary corrections. Eventually, I've gone through everything from the previous day and I'm ready to start writing new material. Using this reverse writing process means that I've already completed the first edit by the time I'm done writing the book. I know I'm done when I've gone through all my note cards and other documents that I've set aside early in the process. I'm confident that I may need to add material later, but for now, I'm ready for the next important step. At that point, I put the files away. Frankly, I'm pretty tired of the content by this point in time. I need a break. Depending on how much time I have before I have to send it to my editor, I let it set for a week. Not only does this give me some time away from my daily writing routine, but it will also allow me to read it with a fresh set of eyes once I'm ready to pick it up again. I print out the manuscript for the first time. I do this because I seem to catch more errors, gaps, and things that don't make sense when I read something on a printed page rather than on a computer screen. I take my time and I read from beginning to end. I mark up things that I want to come back to edit later. I don't fix or rewrite. Instead, I just mark up the pages. And once I'm done with my second edit, I go back to my computer and make any necessary fixes. If I find I'm missing information, I can add it later. Following this, I submit the entire document to my editor. The type of editor you want depends on the kind of project. I tell the college students I teach so they can have a peer read the document. If you have a friend who's a good reader, let them be an objective reader. If you're working under contract with a book publisher, they will assign you to a professional editor. If you're independent, many professionals will provide that function for a fee. No matter who functions as your editor, they will provide you with valuable feedback. If they challenge the information you cite, you may need to go back, do some additional research, and at a minimum, you will be making more edits. After this phase, I again put the document aside for a few days, print it out, do a final read. I refer to it as a final read, then a third or fourth draft, because I want to feel like we're nearing the end. When I'm done, there are only a few things that will need additional attention. This will be the time when you start to second guess what you have written. It's a nagging feeling that most writers will admit having, but the process you followed will make sure that you've done your best from the moment you crafted your first thesis statement or even conceived the project. That's the way it works for me. Your writing process may be different. If you have some other ideas to streamline the writing process, leave a comment below or send me an email. I'd really like to hear from you. It's not easy, but I find it fun to get my ideas from my head to paper and then hopefully to a reader like you. Speaking about reading and writing, I write a weekly newsletter on productivity, leadership, and management, and I'd love to send a copy to you. All you got to do is send me an email or go to my webpage, daveedwardsmedia.com. go to the contact page, send me a note. I'll be happy to add that to you. And while you are at my website, here comes the shameless plug. You could look at the books that I have authored. There's, as I say, more in the works, but if you're interested in any of them, click on the link, purchase a copy. I'd love to have you as a reader as well. I'm Dave Edwards. Thanks very much for joining me.